People think disaster announces itself with thunder, sirens, and men shouting into radios. In my life, it arrived wearing a pressed blue shirt, holding a clipboard, and saying, "Just try your best." I was standing in the dispatch floor break area with a storm map glowing on the wall monitor behind me, a red spiral parked over our county like a bad idea nobody wanted to own. I had 5 new hires assigned to me that week. 5. During a hurricane watch. My name is Lana. I was in my mid-30s, good at reading panic through static, better at keeping my voice level while other people forgot how to breathe. I worked as a 911 dispatching agent for Bayan Public Safety Communications, a fancy name for a room full of screens, ringing lines, stale muffins, and women saving strangers while men in offices called it staffing efficiency. The 5 trainees stood near the consoles with wide eyes and fresh notebooks. Mira asked smart questions. Joe froze whenever 2 alerts chimed at once. Dana had a sharp memory. Kim spoke too fast when nervous. Bev looked calm, which usually meant dangerous competence or a complete internal collapse. I did not yet know which. I found our manager, Rolf, near his office door, studying a forecast the way people study restaurant menus when they know they are ordering the same thing anyway. "We need to split training or suspend it until the storm passes," I said. "This is not a normal weather event. We need charged backup batteries, confirmed radio backups, fuel on site for the generator, and extra staffing. We should also test the overflow lines." He barely looked at me. "Just try your best." That was his whole masterpiece. I followed him 2 steps into the hall. "I am serious. We are already taking calls from flood-prone zones. If power goes out and we have untrained staff on active channels, people can die." He gave me that lazy shrug men reserve for women who know what they are talking about. "It is only a hurricane. It will pass." Then he walked off to a meeting that involved pastries and no visible emergency planning. I stood there long enough to become offended on behalf of electricity itself. I went back to the floor and looked at my trainees. They were waiting for me to pretend everything was fine, which is one of the most expensive habits in any institution. So I did what women do when authority fails and the weather report starts sounding biblical. I made my own system. I assigned quick roles. Mira shadowed me on medical calls. Dana handled location verification drills. Kim practiced calm voice repetition. Joe learned how to route to fire and EMS without hesitating. Bev took notes on every workstation, every battery pack, every radio cradle, every charging cable. I told them the truth without dressing it up. If equipment fails, procedure matters. If procedure fails, judgment matters. If both fail, we protect life, with whatever still works. They stared at me like I had switched from trainer to field commander. Good. During a lull, I checked the backup closet myself. Half the portable battery units were not charging. 2 radio packs were dead. The maintenance log had 3 delayed entries for generator fuel delivery. The signature block belonged to Rolf. I took photos. I copied the log numbers into my notebook. I sent an email to facilities, operations, and my personal account with the subject line, "Urgent storm readiness deficiencies observed on communications floor." I did not expect miracles. I expected a timestamp. Then I went to my car and looked at the portable solar generator I kept in the trunk. People had laughed when I bought it after a brutal summer outage knocked out my apartment building for 2 days. I liked redundancy more than I liked being mocked. The unit could power phones, laptops, a hotspot, and small electronics. I kept foldable solar panels packed beside it, along with charging cords, flashlights, and a power strip. I brought it inside without asking permission. Bev raised an eyebrow. "Do we usually supply our own emergency grid now?" "Only when management mistakes weather for a suggestion," I said. A few of them laughed. Good. Fear breathes shallower when it has competition. By early evening, the sky had that heavy bruised color that makes parking lots look guilty. Calls started stacking faster. Flood advisories turned into rescues. Wind warnings sharpened. The room hummed with tension and fluorescent light. And still nobody had fueled the generator. That was when I stopped hoping the building would protect us and started preparing to protect the building from itself. Storms do not care about policy binders. They do not pause for approval chains or budget codes. They certainly do not wait for a manager to finish pretending a checklist is optional. By the time the first outer bands hit, the dispatch floor sounded like an orchestra tuning itself with anxiety. Phones rang, radios crackled, keyboards snapped under fast fingers. And somewhere behind me, Jo whispered location details to herself like a prayer with street names. I kept the trainees close and rotated them through smaller tasks. I was not going to let 5 green dispatchers drown in a crisis because a man in loafers believed preparation was theatrical. The county emergency dashboard flickered twice. That got my attention. Systems do not flicker unless they are thinking about betrayal. I called facilities again. No answer. I messaged operations. No answer. I walked straight into Rolf's office. He was eating trail mix out of a ceramic mug, which felt like a personal insult. Did fuel arrive? He frowned as if I had interrupted a very serious meeting between himself and cashews. I told maintenance to handle it. Did they handle it? They know what they are doing. That answer has ruined more organizations than greed. I stood there until he looked uncomfortable. The backup batteries are not fully charged. The generator logs show delays. Radio packs are down. We need an immediate confirmation. He exhaled through his nose. Lana, you are creating panic. No, I am documenting negligence. That got his eyes up. I left before he could perform leadership at me. Back on the floor, the wind shoved rain against the windows in hard sheets. Mira was taking notes while I handled a rollover crash. Dana routed a fire assist. Bev updated the whiteboard with flooded intersections. Kim had finally slowed her speech, which meant she was getting dangerous in the best possible way. Jo was still pale, but she was functioning. Then the lights blinked once, twice, and died. For one sharp second, the room went silent in that strange, stunned way people do when technology abandons them. Then the emergency lights failed to come on. Complete darkness. Someone swore. Someone else gasped. A headset clattered to the floor. I clicked on my flashlight and shouted, "Nobody move away from your console. Use phone lights. Stay seated. Mira, count heads." A few monitors stayed alive for a breath, then blacked out. The air conditioning died. The room suddenly sounded full of weather. Rolf burst from his office asking whether the generator had kicked in. I looked at him in the beam of my flashlight. That is an excellent question for the man who did not fuel it. He ran toward the equipment room. I heard a door slam, then a curse loud enough to qualify as a public statement. I did not wait for his confession. I hauled my portable solar generator onto an empty desk, plugged in a power strip, and started triage. My cell phone went on charge first, then my mobile hotspot, then one laptop with county mapping access and one spare headset adapter we could still use through a voice over internet backup app. It was not pretty, but neither is resuscitation. Dana, hand me the backup line list. Bev, use your phone and call the regional mutual aid desk. Tell them our center is partially dark and we are establishing manual relay. Kim, write every incoming incident on paper by priority. Jo, you are with me. There is a magical moment in every emergency when people stop asking who is in charge and start listening to the person who already is. Within minutes, we had a stripped-down operation running off my car kit. 2 charged phones, a hotspot, a half-alive laptop, and stubbornness. Bev reached mutual aid. Mira coordinated callbacks from a printed list. Dana verified addresses against the map. Kim logged units by hand. Jo relayed medical instructions. I fed her one sentence at a time. The official system was crippled. Our improvised line was not. Calls poured in from flooded homes, a downed tree crushing a porch, a diabetic man trapped without transport, an elderly woman with chest pain, a family stranded in rising water, and more. Rolf reappeared looking sweaty and newly acquainted with consequences. "No fuel," he said, as if reading aloud from a tragedy he had not authored. I did not even look up. Amazing detective work. He opened his mouth. then closed it when he saw the floor functioning without him. 8 critical calls came through that backup line before outside support stabilized our load. 8. Not abstract statistics. 8. Breathing, breakable people connected to us by threadbare power and a woman he had told to try her best. I did better than that. And while I was saving lives, I was also building a case. Adrenaline is excellent for survival and terrible for forgiveness. By the time the worst of the storm moved inland, I had been running on instinct, caffeine gum, and a level of contempt that could probably light a small suburb. The trainees looked stunned but sharper, like the storm had sanded away whatever harmless illusions they brought to the job. Outside, help finally took some call volume. Emergency power trucks were promised. These somebody from county administration started calling every 20 minutes and using phrases like continuity failure and incident review. I found those phrases comforting. Rolf found them less so. He kept hovering near my desk with the dazed expression of a man who had always believed incompetence was survivable if attached to a title. At one point, he tried to thank me for stepping up. I turned in my chair and said, "Do not confuse my duty to the public with loyalty to your mistakes." That landed beautifully. When the floor quieted enough to breathe, I started organizing evidence. Photos of dead battery indicators, maintenance logs showing delayed fuel runs, emails I sent before the outage, texts from facilities staff confirming they had requested approval for generator fueling twice. A voicemail from operations that politely translated to, "Yes." Rolf kept pushing it back. Documentation is the plain suit revenge wears to court. I taught the trainees as I worked, not in a classroom voice, in the practical tone women use when the lesson needs to pay rent. Anytime safety is involved, put concerns in writing. Email beats hallway conversations. Dates matter. Names matter. Logs matter. If someone ignores a risk, your best shield is a clean record showing you raised it early. Mira nodded like she was engraving it into bone. Dana asked whether public agencies had records laws. Good question. Yes, I said. Many communications, maintenance requests, and readiness logs can become discoverable through internal review, labor complaints, civil claims, or public records requests, depending on the agency structure. People get very brave about shortcuts when they think paper will stay buried. Kim stared at Rolf's office. So he could actually be held responsible? Managers are not royal weather ornaments, I said. They have duties. Once a foreseeable risk is known, ignoring mitigation can become negligence, especially where life safety is involved. That word moved through the room like a new kind of thunder. Negligence. Not bad luck. Not chaos. Not nobody could have known. Negligence. Around sunrise, a regional supervisor named Celia arrived in soaked flats and a rain jacket, carrying the kind of quiet authority that makes weak managers develop sudden scheduling conflicts. She asked for a timeline. I handed her one already started in my notebook. Her eyebrows rose higher with every page. "You ran a backup line from a personal power unit?" she asked. "Yes." "And these 8 life-threatening calls were processed through that chain?" "Yes." "And you reported the generator and battery concerns before failure?" "Yes." Repeatedly. Celia looked toward Rolf's office for a long moment that felt almost festive. Then she asked for copies of everything. I gave them gladly. By late morning, the 8 calls had begun coming back to us in fragments of outcome. The stranded family was rescued from rising water. The elderly woman with chest pain reached the hospital alive. The diabetic man got transport in time. A child with breathing distress was reached before the road fully washed out. More confirmations followed. 8 lives. There are moments when anger becomes so precise it stops feeling hot. It turns cold and exact, like crystal. And I did not want Rolf yelled at. I wanted him audited. I did not want gossip. I wanted findings. I did not want one grand speech in a conference room. I wanted his decisions laid out beside policy, duty, procurement records, storm advisories, and the preventable chain of failure he had built with every shrug. So while he stumbled through explanations about supply timing and unforeseen demand, I emailed Celia, Human Resources, County Risk Management, and our union representative with a formal incident summary. I attached everything. I included the phrase foreseeable equipment failure following repeated readiness warnings because accuracy can be surprisingly elegant. Then I went to the restroom, looked at my face in the mirror, and laughed once. Not because it was funny. It is because nothing unnerves negligent men quite like a woman who has stopped trying to be agreeable and started being correct. The week after the storm, the building smelled like wet carpet, printer toner, and fear in dress shoes. Repairs were underway. Portable equipment had appeared from somewhere magical, which is to say, from budgets that always exist once failure becomes embarrassing enough. New battery stations were mounted, fuel contracts were suddenly urgent, backup drills were scheduled by people who had previously treated preparedness like a hobby for pessimists. Funny how fast policy learns to jog when liability starts stretching. I was called into 3 meetings in 2 days. In the first, Human Resources smiled too much. In the second, Risk Management smiled not at all. In the third, Rolf was absent, which made it the most productive one. Celia chaired the review. She had my incident summary, the maintenance logs, copies of my emails, the delayed fuel requests, and statements from 2 facilities workers who confirmed they were told to hold off because the storm was probably overhyped. That phrase belonged to Rolf. His talent for self-destruction was finally contributing to public safety. I answered every question with dates, facts, and calm. That calm was deliberate. Women are often baited into sounding emotional, so that truth can be relabeled attitude. I was not giving them the discount version of my intelligence. One analyst asked whether I had authorization to power agency operations with my personal equipment. No, I said. I also did not have authorization to let 8 people die while approved systems sat dark. Silence. Then Celia nodded once, very slightly. The trainees gave statements too. Mira described the dark floor and the dead monitors. Dana confirmed I had raised concerns before the outage. Bev had copied down the battery status from my direction and still had the paper. Kim, who had found her spine in the storm, repeated Rolf's exact phrase. It is only a hurricane. It will pass. Jo cried halfway through her statement, then apologized, then kept talking anyway. I was prouder of her than I expected. That Friday, I learned something useful about institutions. They love a hero right until the hero brings receipts. Operations wanted to commend me. Risk wanted to contain exposure. Human Resources wanted to remind everyone about appropriate escalation channels, which was rich, considering I had used them and gotten a shrug. So I escalated beyond comfort. A cousin of one of the rescued callers worked for a local paper. I did not leak confidential information because I am strategic, not reckless. But I did know exactly how public records laws worked, exactly which agency reports would be requestable, and exactly how quickly an incident review becomes harder to bury once a reporter asks why a 911 center lost primary and backup power readiness during a forecast storm. I also spoke to our union representative about unsafe working conditions and foreseeable equipment failures. He nearly glowed when I handed him the paper trail. There is revenge in rage, yes, but there is deeper revenge in process. Process gets signatures. Process gets hearings. Process turns private dismissal into public consequence. By the next work cycle, Rolf was on administrative leave pending review. The official memo used bland language about emergency preparedness compliance, supervisory judgment, and continuity failures. Bureaucracy has a wonderful way of sounding dull while ruining a careless career. I did not celebrate loudly. I just bought myself good takeout, slept for half a day, and inventoried my car kit. Then Celia asked me to help design a new storm readiness protocol. That was the sweetest part. Not because I got more work, because the woman told to just try her best was now writing the standards everyone else would be measured against. I built them hard and clear. Weekly battery checks, signed generator fuel verification before major weather events, portable communications backups tested on schedule, training suspension triggers during declared emergencies, paper call logging kits at every console, supervisor accountability trails that could not vanish into hallway fog. And one more thing. I submitted a reimbursement request for my portable solar generator use, accessories, and emergency data charges. Petty? No. Educational. Women are taught to save the day and call it teamwork. I saved the day and attached invoices. A month later, the county held a recognition event in a room too beige for the size of what had happened. There were folding chairs, a podium, bottled water, and a banner about service excellence that looked as if it had survived 3 budget cuts and a flood. I wore navy, low heels, and the expression of a woman who had already read the meeting notes before anyone else entered the room. The 8 rescues had become official commendations by then. Families had sent messages. One elderly woman mailed a handwritten card thanking the calm voice that stayed with her while the storm rattled her windows and her chest tightened. A father from the flood rescue wrote that whoever kept that line open gave his children back their future. I kept those notes in a drawer at home. They mattered more than the plaque. Still, I accepted the plaque. Women should not be shy about evidence of value. Celia spoke first. She praised the trainees for composure under extraordinary conditions. She praised interagency cooperation. Then she looked at me. Some people follow procedure, she said. Some people become the reason better procedure exists. That was elegant enough to frame. Rolf was not there. He had resigned before the final review concluded, which told me everything I needed to know about the evidence stack. His severance, if any, was none of my business. His absence was. After the event, Mira asked whether I had always been this prepared. No, I said. I learned the expensive way that hope is not a backup system. She laughed. So did I. The new protocols were already changing the center. Supervisors now had to sign readiness checks before forecast threats. Fuel vendors were understanding agreements with delivery triggers. Backup batteries were tested and logged. We had a dedicated manual operations box at each dispatch pod. Training loads during emergencies were capped. Nobody called that overreaction anymore. I started leading readiness workshops for new staff, not with speeches, with scenarios. What do you do when a manager dismisses a foreseeable risk? You document it. What do you do when verbal warnings vanish? You send the email. What do you do when systems fail? You preserve life first, then preserve records. What do you do when someone tells you to be less difficult? You become harder to ignore. That was the real lesson, and it was bigger than one storm. In any workplace, especially one tied to public safety, women need to understand the practical power of documentation, chain of command, procurement records, incident logs, labor protections, and reimbursement rights. If you raise a safety concern in good faith, put it in writing. If equipment is not maintained, note it early. If leadership ignores a foreseeable threat, escalate through the proper channels and keep copies. Competence is protection. Paper is armor. As for my own revenge, it was never about screaming across a conference table or watching a man get escorted out while I sipped victory tea. When it was better than that, I outperformed him in the dark. I saved 8 lives with the backup he mocked by omission. I used the rules he ignored to bring consequences straight to his office door. And then I turned my survival plan into policy, so the next woman would not have to drag a power grid out of her trunk to keep a city breathing. Around early evening, after the event ended and the building emptied, I walked to my car and opened the trunk. The solar generator sat there, recharged and ready. I rested my hand on it for a moment and smiled. People love to say storms reveal character. That is not quite true. Storms reveal preparation. Character is what you do after. When the lights come back, the excuses start, and you decide whether to stay quiet. I closed the trunk gently. Then I drove home under a clear sky, knowing something Rolf learned too late. Some women are not the calm before the storm. We are the backup power.